years ago because I had a lot of newsprint. A couple books. Maybe Jeff can talk to these since he chose them.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. These books are very interesting. The first one we have here is How to Buy a Used Car. And it's a complete guide from start to finish on how to buy a used car from the perspective of an experienced licensed car dealer. Well, very interesting. I can't say I recommend it because it turns out Dr. Zeke is actually a practicing dealership in the States. So it's just how to move things toward there. And of course, the favorite one of all of us in the car business is the Lemonade. And it's not such a big deal anymore, but it used to be quite a big thing. And of course, then we had to start, run, and grow a used car dealership on a budget. It's certainly something these days that a budget is something that just blown out of the water these days. So there you go, some stuff worth looking into. So a couple of things to go over. The usual thing that the opinions shared here today are the opinions of our guests and not necessarily of us. And even though we like our guests and they're pretty good people, and just in case somebody doesn't like it, we blame them. And so our today's show is how to handle challenging used car situations. Very interesting. We had a slate of we have two gentlemen joining us today from two different auction type of parts of the business, and we had some dealership people lined up that it just seems that for some reason they don't want to go on a show, and it's very interesting how we're finding that lately that dealership folks seem to be a little bit concerned on presenting their opinions online. And the nice thing is one of our first guests joining us today doesn't have to worry about that because he answers to himself. And he's the CEO of AutoZen, a new startup auction out here for dealerships. But Olivier Vincent. Olivier, can you take a moment to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Jeff. And I wish you were right about reporting only to myself. It's never the case. You always have partners and investors, and more importantly, clients. And that's really who you're reporting to, ultimately. So no, I'm reporting to a lot of people. But AutoZen is a very early stage company. So we just really opened shop earlier this year. The idea is to help consumers sell their cars directly and more easily to dealers. So we're trying to create literally a new category in the marketplace, which is a private to dealer solution, and try to build it in a way that is very seamless and frictionless for both parties. And the idea here is really to try to bring a fair amount of these cars that we usually sell private to private and bring them to the dealers, but bring them in a way where indeed the consumers will feel that they are being handled properly, that the price is reasonable. It's never going to be the best price, of course. If you sell it privately, you'll get you'll probably get a better price. It may take 3, 4, 8 weeks. You don't know. But the idea is to have a reasonable price, and very importantly to do it while staying into your sofa. The idea here is we take care of everything for the consumers. We first show them some estimate on the valuation, and if they like it, it's an important step because sometimes consumers have a very high expectation of what their car is worth. And if their expectation is really high, it's very hard to change their mind and tell them, you probably will not get that and it's going to be a lot of work. But there's a whole group of people who just want to let it go. Actually, let it go happen to be our tagline. The exciting and interesting part is to buy the next car, not to get rid of the older one. And so we're trying to find a way so we take care of everything and they don't have to work too hard for it. We're going to send an inspector to their home or their office or wherever they want. So we're going to have a checkup of the car before it goes to auction. And then the process is, I would say, fairly similar to what Frank probably does at EBlocks or TradeRev. It's a standard, dealers lined up to offer their best price. And we go back to the consumer. If they accept the offer, we'll take care of everything. The payment, the paperwork, the pickup, and we're going to deliver the car directly to the dealer at the end. So
Terrific.
sorry for the little monologue, but I hope it gives a bit of context.
Great. Thank you
Thank
so
you, Frank.
much. And our second guest today is Frank Pastulovic from EBlock. He's the Western Canada Arbitration Manager and certainly a highly experienced auction gentleman. Frank, can you take a moment and introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, all. Yeah, as Jeff mentioned, my name is Frank Pastulovich. I have been in the auction industry for approximately 11 years, 8 with DESA, Vancouver, and now 3.5 with EBlock as Western Canada Manager. I handle the day-to-day arbitration, or as we now have rebranded here at EBlock, sales resolution agents. We have 3 in Western Canada that handle day-to-day problems. Anywhere from engine problems to missing titles, liens on vehicles, vehicles that have crossed the border and have problems in the U.S. So a multitude of issues and problems that we deal with on a daily basis and try and resolve issues for buyers and sellers and keep vehicles sold to the best of our ability. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what we do.
Well, I have to say, Frank, you and I have experienced each other lots of times, and rarely has it ever come out in my favor. No, just kidding. But rarely has it ever come out anything but resolved. So moving right along. So there can't be a more challenging situation than dealing with a dealer, seeing as how you're auction guys, who's bought a car at auction and is suffering from buyer's remorse. We all hate it on the retail side, but boy, we all do it. Frank, can you tell us some of the most memorable ones you've been involved with? But of course, anonymous IDs, please.
So, I mean, there's a multitude of them. The one that it's a category more than an individual problem is vehicles that sell as is. To me, that's some of the most frustrating labels on a car when a buyer freely purchases a vehicle as is and then chooses to arbitrate that car. And the puzzling question is, well, you know you're buying the car as is, and now you've got a problem with it, and you're calling arbitration, trying to open a file on it. It's like, yeah, well, the seller knew he somehow deceived me. How do you prove deceit from a buyer's or seller's point of view? You're trying to gather information, and the only way to prove that is if you have some sort of a invoice from a dealer when the vehicle is owned by the seller to prove the vehicle had a problem prior to sale. Otherwise, you're trying to prove something that's almost impossible to prove. Another one would be, we had a vehicle years ago that I dealt with. This one ended up in court, actually. The gentleman bought the unit, I believe it was a GMC Envoy, and had an aftermarket sunroof cut into it, which is typical for the market. I mean, a lot of vehicles have aftermarket sunroofs. This gentleman now opened the file stating that the sunroof was actually structural damage. So we went through a bunch of inspections. He had the motor vehicle inspection here in BC say, yeah, it is structural damage. My response to him was at that point, well, if every car on the market that's had an aftermarket sunroof cut into it now has structural damage, this is opening up a can of worms that just is beyond capacity or thought, that every unit that has a roof cut into it would have structural damage. We, at that point, offered to take the vehicle back, and instead of going any further with it, he took us to court, and he lost. Because at that point, the auction said, you know what, we'll just take the car back, and we'll just resell it. So that was one of them, and that's quite a few years ago. Another one was more recent. A gentleman buys a vehicle on our format. The vehicle is disclosed as requiring engine repairs, disclosed as it lacks power, disclosed with vibration engine. He buys the car, does an oil flush. First of all, he buys the car and buyer's remorse. I didn't see the decks. I want the sale canceled. So, well, you can't do that. So we have a system online where we can pull the listings when the actual decks were added. And we proved to him the decks were there before he actually bid on the car. So he accepts it, takes the car, does a hot oil flush on it 3 times, calls me, says, you know what, noise is gone. I'm going to rerun it. I said, okay, fine, rerun it. He runs it with just an engine light on and sporadic. Of course, the car sells. He phones me when it sells. Says, by the way, just so you know, I'm not arbitrating the engine light. Fair enough. The buyer's aware of it. We're not going to arbitrate the engine light. The car arrives at the buyer's location. I get a call within 10 minutes. Engine's noisy. Well, I go back to the seller, and you would not believe the pushback that I got from this guy. Like it's to the point that he's actually stopped using EBlock as an auction platform because he feels we were so unfair. To me, it's like, well, you knew I had a problem. You chose not to disclose that problem fully, and now you're using arbitration as a scapegoat that it's our fault somehow because we misled you or you misled us. And yeah, in the end, car went back to him. He was very upset about it. He power texted me for about 2 days. You know what a bad person I was, and he couldn't believe that how deceitful I was. That he told me that he wouldn't arbitrate this, and I went back, and then I tried to explain to him engine light, engine noise, apples and oranges. So stuff like that comes across all the time, and it's like it's frustrating when they take a stand, and if you look at the facts, they're wrong, but to them they're right. So, but those three are in a nutshell. It can be memorable and frustrating at times too.
Well, I have to say, I definitely have had many a time where I bought a car and I went, wow, what did I do? I remember one at Odessa where I bought an Audi, and they declared it as, slight engine noise. And the driver pulls in, the Odessa driver pulls in with it, and I can hear it from my office. And I went, wow, I didn't know Audi made a diesel engine. And it turns out it was run by Volkswagen Financial, who their arbitration process is awful, right, Frank?
Oh,
they're terrible. And they told me to call their complaint line, which is 1-800-pound-sand.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily enough, the arbitration guy at that time, which wasn't Frank, found out that there was a campaign from Audi because they had a problem with the take up from the oil pan. So luckily enough, they covered my engine, but it wasn't buyer's remorse. So Olivia, I know you guys are fairly new at this, but have you run into any issues where somebody's bought a car and went, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah, it's indeed a very different from us because we're dealing with consumers to dealers, and so I don't have. It probably won't take too long to start to having some, but I don't have too many of these. The way I would have answered this question with, and I'm still going to see if I can do that, but is to talk about the challenges of selling private to private and how it is also fraught with massive issues and awkward situations. So I may have misunderstood the question initially, but I got a couple anecdotes though from people very close to me. One of them was just doing a very casual run around the block drive around with somebody that showed up to test his car, and they run into a very minor fender bender, very minor, just a little scratch. But the guy that came to check the car just walked away, didn't want to stay. And so my buddy who stayed there with his car, of course, obviously the owner of the other car was a little, worried about what was going on here, as if somebody was leaving the scene. And so my buddy had to show the ad and explain what was going on. That anyway he was insured, he took care of everything. But the other driver was, that close to call the police on what was happening, and so very awkward situation. So yeah, it's different, very different environment. But for us, that's what matters the most is as we're really trying to help consumers sell more easily to dealers and avoid the brutality of selling privately. That other female friend, she probably had 20 people come look at her car, and I think 5 of them, the guys asked for her phone number. That seemed to be, their new dating app, confusion with a car selling app, and including a guy who was married with his wife. So that was a little weird. So all sort of awkward moments happening there. I think I have more anecdotes also on people who sold privately from another private and then run into buying a lemon and running into issues with that afterwards. And as we know, when you buy from a consumer, there is not as easy an arbitration opportunity as when you buy from another dealer. And so this has to, that's why we do that inspection process at the beginning, so that we can filter out, most of the issues. And we will come with a scanner and check the computer and that engine light and what's happening, and we'll drive the cars. So, but sorry, I'm doing a little salesy plug here.
No
No,
worries.
not a problem at all.
I was wondering, I mean, we have some dealers on the call. We've got, Christian there. Maybe Christian has some thoughts on situations to do with used cars from a dealer perspective.
Well, I guess in we've run into those situations where we've bought car at auction and you've had arbitratable issue, and I've come up with some satisfied situations. I've come up with ones that I haven't been too happy with. And so I think at the end of the day, right, one of our biggest challenges on getting used cars is sourcing them, predicting reconditioning, marketability, all that kind of stuff. And our best chance of doing that effectively is when we can see, touch, smell, and drive the car. So trade-ins are the key to a healthy used car business. But depending on your brand and depending on the size of your store, you often have to reach out to other sources to get cars, and that's where EBlock and their competitors and come into play. And for the most part, I've had a good experience with it. But on occasion, I've had some times where I've been not too happy. So.
And do you have any advice for dealers from an arbitration point of view about how they can do that better, or maybe how the auction companies can do a better job?
Well, the times when I've had issues is when I've paid for a post-sale inspection, and that's what the auction's supposed to do, is check it over, because I didn't have a chance to do that myself. And then a issue comes up, and it's either you still get a bit of pushback or fight because the selling party, the whoever owned the car before, isn't really interested in giving up any money. But from my perspective, the things I have learned, and unfortunately have not always followed, which is, as soon as you get a car from the auction, get it in your own shop, get it in the air, check it out right away, so that you can identify anything that may have been missed by the auction or anything that is of concern, so you can get on the arbitration situation as quickly as possible. You let those things delay, and if your shop's busy and they don't get the car in for 3 or 4 days, and then the service manager doesn't talk to the used car manager for a day or two, or it can snowball out of control, and all of a sudden you're asking to arbitrate a car that's 10 days old. I get it. So it's incumbent upon us that buy the cars to get them looked at ASAP.
Right.
Frank never runs into that, do you, Frank?
No, I'd like to add a little bit to that, actually. With EBlock, what we've done in the last, since January, we've introduced an assured program. So what that, in a sense, does, it covers repairs for the buyers. If a vehicle arrives, and again, we now allow 3 days inspection as opposed to 2 days to get the vehicle through a shop, or if you think there's something wrong with it, and the repair that's over $750 that qualifies for arbitration and under $3,000, we no longer go back to the seller. The Assure program takes care of the repairs. So it takes a bit of pain out of the equation, dealing with the seller and the buyer, trying to get a resolution. EBlock takes care of that resolution and tries and just justifies the repairs and makes sure they're accurate, and just pays for the repairs to expedite the process and keep everybody satisfied and happy as possible. So that's since January 1st, I believe, that program was introduced. There's an extra charge to the buyer and seller, minimal, $59 to each party, that covers this new Assure program. So far, it's been a huge success, and everybody's very happy with it. So.
Oh, by the way, Christian, if you need to get some vehicles, EBlock's got a sale on today. They got a Rolls-Royce Cullinan for only $395,000 starting price.
Where's my checkbook at?
It's a whole bunch of minivans and crossover utilities for that.
Hey, Frank, is it $59 per month or per vehicle, or
per vehicle?
Per vehicle, yeah.
Used inventory is becoming harder and harder to get these days. Tell us how you're going to overcome this. And Jeff and I were talking before the show this morning about a Corvette, which of course I have behind me, as Jeff currently owns one, and he was saying how ridiculous the one online was being sold for based on the mileage. Maybe all of you can start with this. How do you feel you're going to overcome this?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's clearly a seller's market right now for many reasons. There's mostly COVID driven, but a number of reasons that have snowballed. OEMs are late delivering, and so people don't want to wait that long. They're going to buy a used car, um, or they maybe have financial worries about having lost their job or potentially losing their job, and so they're not ready to replace the old car with a new. They're going to go with another used, maybe slightly better. And so you've got all these vectors that sort of compound each other's, and so it's another one is unfortunately too many cars going to the US as well, which is draining on the inventory. So sourcing cars is not easy. Yet we find a lot of people that are still selling. You know, let's suppose the supply has gone down by 20 or 30%. Well, you still have, 60, 70, 80% of these cars are available. So in our case, we're presenting a new solution to consumers. It looks like consumers have developed a strong resistance against dealers approaching them directly. And even if you don't have an experience in that, you just need to talk to a couple of them and realize how the negotiation goes and how they're trying to to push into a deal. So we find tons of consumers that just really want to make sure we're not dealers, and so there's a bit of a Chinese wall they managed to build there. But if we explain that we actually are a third party, we're not a dealer, but we're working with all of them. Try to get the best from dealers. Dealers have money in their hands. Dealers are looking for cars. Dealers can buy your car within 48 hours, which is you're not going to get that from consumers. So there's plenty of benefits of working with a dealer, but working with them one by one is probably where the fear and the evil comes out for consumers. So by building that sort of protected walled garden environment for consumers, they can actually deal with these buyers, and not have to deal with what they perceive as the duress. And it's working very well. I would say out of 100 consumers we talk to that are selling their car, 80 of them are ready to go into AutoZen and let us look at their car. So but it takes a bit of an effort to explain that we're not a dealer disguised into an intermediary step. The other important component is to explain that there is no charge to the seller. The price they will be offered is going to go directly to them. Obviously, there is a cost; it's being paid on the dealer side, and yes, ultimately, it's money that is not going to go in the pocket of the seller. So there is a cost to the seller no matter what, and we're being very upfront about it. But it's at really no risk for the consumer into getting the platform, and they're not going to be charged with any surprise fee at the end into the transaction. So all these elements together, and we're finding out that there's still hundreds of cars that are ready to be sold on a weekly basis in just in Metro Vancouver.
Fantastic. Frank, what's your thought on this? I mean, obviously, as you look at the Black Book monthly report, and as you look at all the export to the U.S., how are you guys going to overcome this?
Well, we're strictly a dealer-to-dealer network online auction. So and we do have not a fair amount. There's a couple of large buyers in the east and two or three here in the west that export vehicles to the U.S. I mean, there's certain kind of vehicles they'll purchase, BMWs, midline BMWs. A lot of the trucks, the F-150s, the Rams are heading down south. So those vehicles, I mean, it's a buyer's market, like Oliver mentioned. You get these guys on it, and sometimes they pull ridiculous money, and it's just it does affect the local markets because of the lack of vehicles out there, and this is driving the price up. Right now, it is a seller's market here in Vancouver and back east, I believe, as well. So it's driven partially by the U.S. market and the lack of vehicles out there. And again, to go back to what Olivia said, a lot of people working from home now, they don't take transit anymore. So that drives that market, that lower end. vehicle market where they're just looking to get a car for a daily commuter, and it's now driven that part of the market even more so than it was, say, 2 years ago before COVID came around and spurred that side of the market. But yeah, it's definitely a seller's market right now, and some of the vehicles I go see through, and the Insure program has helped the confidence of the buyers as well on the wholesale side, because now it's taken some of the risk out of buying used cars, especially the older units that might have the oil leaks, that might have the misfires, that might have the diff noises, that might have the transmission slips that are now you've got some help, you've got some coverage. So it's helped that way.
So has it changed, being that you're dealer to dealer, has it changed sort of how the dealers are selling cars to you at all?
In what sense?
Like what they're selling, or has that changed at all?
Um, it's again like most dealers will mention, it comes down to that 90-day hold vehicle. If it gets to a certain point, the vehicle is no longer it's hit the 90-day period, it becomes a wholesale piece. In some cases, if you're a domestic store and you get imports, vehicles that you don't typically sell on your lot, those will end up on the auction market. Wholesale pieces where a car comes in, the manager looks at it, says, yeah, you know what, that car is worth $1,500, straight to the back lot, it becomes a wholesale piece. So those ones will always be around. You'll get sent if the managers see a need for a particular model or make. If they have it on their lot, they will put on the auction and sometimes pull more than retail on an auction platform. So that's happened time to time as well.
Well, I have to say there's a big situation right now, like you mentioned. I've been watching the auctions, and you get things like a 1-ton pickup, and you don't even bother. A lot of these guys aren't even bothering putting it up for sale. They're just putting it on the auction, and especially the old ones that they have to repair. Somebody's paying ridiculous sums. It is more than retail, isn't it?
Mhm.
So, question, gentlemen, how can dealers, from your side of the thing, how can they counter the threat posed by the new online platforms? In the States, of course, it's Carvana with their vending machine dealers, and but here, of course, in Canada as well, we've got Canada Drives, which is promoting online. So, how can dealers counter that threat? Olivier, what do you think about that?
Oh, I've got so many thoughts around that, and I do think it's a very serious threat. Um, it's they own 0.3% of the market share in the U.S. for now, so it's very nascent. It's very early, and so it seems relatively anecdotal, but I think the threat is real, and I've seen that in other industries. I'm a little ashamed to say I was for a long time in the Yellow Pages industry. I say ashamed, actually. It's a joke. It was beautiful industry, but they totally missed the turn out of print into digital. And plenty of companies, including Google, built a better way. Yellow Pages are still very strong, if not stronger than ever. But you do it all online. And Google has, and a couple other companies like HubSpot have taken most of the money out of it. And these huge players that were so successful and so well established and so profitable didn't see what happened to them, and when they found out, it was too late. And so I think there is a real demand on the consumer side to have a contactless, seamless, um, frictionless interaction. We see that in other industries, and so there is a pressure to go that way in the automobile world. The automobile is still a very visceral product. You want to touch it, you want to drive it. So I think there is a long future for dealerships, the physical ones, but a big part of the experience could be moved into the cloud before the sale, maybe after the sale as well. And so I think it's very important for the industry to look at all the solutions that are out there. Let me try. I'd be happy to go deeper on these points, but another thought I'd like to just put on the radar here is look at Amazon, right? The way they went around all the local businesses, and now you can buy pretty much anything you used to buy locally, you can buy it on Amazon. Well, there is a beautiful Toronto-based company called Shopify that has built a counterfire there against Amazon, and that allows each of the retail store and the smaller businesses to have their own online presence. And I think it's a beautiful solution. And by the way, Shopify is killing it. Other clients are killing it as well. But I think there is a similar play available to the automobile industry, which is a bit of a Shopify approach where I'm going to power my own systems and processes to be a lot more in the cloud and remain relevant, as opposed to try to stay entrenched with the whole way of doing things and then wake up when it's a little too late. So I think there's plenty of opportunities to respond to Carvana. There's a company out of Toronto called Clutch.ca. They just raised a few $1 million. They seem to have great management, great investors. You should take them seriously. They're coming for you and they're coming for your dealership business, and they're good. They're good people. So there are many of ways to respond to these, and it's to really embrace a change and look at these tools and try not to wait too long.
Terrific. So Frank, I know you're obviously not on the retail side at all, but you speak to dealers all the time. What's your opinion on this? How can dealers counter this? And by the way, are operations like Canada Drives and Clutch, are they buying through you guys as well?
I have not seen either one of those come across the arbitration table as far as those two particular dealers or online entities. The dealers I speak to locally, I mean, it's still the boots in the ground is still there. People are still coming to look at the vehicles. The trust factor, I guess, is part of it. Buying a vehicle online, as mentioned, you don't know what you're getting. The touch, feel, smell the vehicle is always critical. That being said, there's also that convenience we've all now experienced with COVID, staying at home, buying off a computer, whether it's skip the dishes or, in this case, maybe buying a car online. It's something that's going to be the way of the future, I feel, as far as it's creatures of convenience. If I can get it brought to me, why should I go get it? So, and that's where I think it's kind of the future of car sales might be heading. But and I know years and years ago, Toyota tried a pilot program where they had no salespeople. You bought the vehicle online and you went and picked it up at the dealership. You had a delivery person who would now walk you through the vehicle and show you how the offices all worked. It was a pilot project. I don't know how far it went, but the salespeople were not on commission. They were delivery people only. So that was, is that something that may be the wave of the future? Possibly. You're buying a car online, you get into a price, agreed price, then you go pick it up and somebody demos the car to you once you're taking delivery. So.
Well, actually, Frank, that's an interesting point. We actually had a video on a past show that you might want to check out. It's an initiative from Toyota New Zealand. It was a couple of years ago, I think they started it. But essentially what they did is they have about a 30% market share in New Zealand. They actually did a survey of their customers saying, what do you not like about the car process? They were a little shocked that, customers at a significant didn't like the car dealer experience or the negotiation experience, I guess. So they actually changed their model and been quite successful. But I think they're still paying the salespeople, but the role of the salespeople is quite different. And the vast majority of what's being done is done online. There's actually also a pretty interesting initiative, both from Dilawri in Canada, and it now looks like Policaro has joined the fray there, as have big dealers like Paragon in New York City, for example, where they're basically breaking that traditional car model and saying, listen, we'll work with you, Mr. Customer. How do you want this to go? Do you want us to take the car to you? Do you want to come see the car? Do you want us to, and Genesis is doing this also in Canada as well with, I think, some success there as well. I think it's more about adapting that process based on what the customer prefers. And that might be generational, it might be comfort level, it might be the time, it might be, there's a lot of different pieces there. But I think what is proven is that this process is clearly evolving and probably will continue to evolve around the world.
Don't mind, I'll add a quick second here. I think we get caught up in deciding whether it's all or nothing, right? And it's a constant spectrum between how we used to operate the business and how we need to. And Blockbuster didn't think much of Netflix originally, right? So at some point, you can ignore a trend in your industry, and think you can overcome it by not doing anything, or you can jump all in and be too far ahead of the curve or miss it all completely. So I think what we have to do is evolve as, and you said it kind of correctly, and as the customer needs it and desires it. And on top of it all, we have to break the mold. We have to deliver fantastic service, and we have to maintain relationships with those people that we do or are fortunate enough to sell a car to. And if we don't do those things, it won't matter what the process of buying it is. You still got to take care of the customer. So, I think we just have to be mindful that yes, the industry is changing, and I try to be as, I'm going to say ahead of the curve as much as possible, or at least in tune with it. Um, and you learn, you make a mistake, you grow a little bit, and you adapt. But if you're waiting for it to, if you're thinking it's not going to change, you know, you're going to be left behind. So
Yeah, I like what Christian is saying, because it's very fundamental in terms of psychology and frame of mind. It's generally the automobile industry has been a little too stubbornly low tech over the last many years, and so that frame of mind that Christian is describing, I think, is very fundamental. I think the everybody here is super smart and they're amazing business people, so they don't take long. And you just have to look at the success of a company like eBlock to see that indeed the company is ready to embrace the technology when it's here and it makes sense. And so it is very good sign for the industry that they were able to embrace and understand how this works. But it's a continuous process. It's not something you do every 5 years. And I think COVID has really accelerated a lot on the consumer side, the look for these more seamless interactions. And so the on the dealer side, I think we need to be ready to progress at a faster rate at the moment. Otherwise, somebody, like the good old Steve Jobs used to say, if you ask your customers what they need, they won't tell you, or if they tell you what they need, it's too late. It's because they've seen it from somebody else. And so I think we all got to spend a fair amount of time looking at what's out there and start testing a little early on. Because if we wait for somebody to show us the way, then we'll probably have missed that wave or maybe a couple other waves. I'm sorry I'm a little preachy here, but that mentality Christian is describing, I think, is exactly the proper one.
Yeah,
Well,
and thanks for that, Olivier. I mean, we've had a number of salesmen and managers on the show over the last year or so talk about sort of how they're adaptable or flexible to that customer. Marco, who's a salesman, works at Mercedes in Toronto, did actually a very good article when he worked at an Audi store talking about how he sold, I think, 40 cars using mostly his phone and had a huge data bill. But really, what I learned from that article and his and others' attitudes on the show and thoughts was that you have to ask the customer, Mr. Customer, what's a benefit to you? Do you want me to bring the car to you? Do you want to come see the car? Do you want me to appraise your trade remotely? Do you want, how do you want it to work? What's your comfort level? Because in addition to COVID, it's just a question of, customers value their time more now than ever. And some of them are a little bit afraid, obviously, for obvious reasons. And as a dealer, you really got to provide that concierge service. I've even seen dealers with ads recently where they're posting new jobs, which are, we need a concierge, as opposed to an Apple Genius or the BMW Genius program. We need someone who's going to be a concierge or a sales assistant to really make it easier for that customer to have a better experience, which is really what it's all about. There's no magic answer for everybody, but you have to ask the question and be flexible, I think, is what I've learned. Jeff?
It's a good point. I know that in the past, talking to a lot of my friends and family members and all that, one of the fears of going to a dealership or a used car lot is as soon as you walk on that lot, you got a shadow, you're being followed. And that, to me, that's one of the more annoying parts of trying to shop physically on a vehicle, when you've got somebody following you around and looking over your shoulder, and it becomes uncomfortable.
yeah, for sure. Although I have to tell you, our favorite favorite defensive car dealer move is walk into a one of the big box furniture stores and you watch what happens there, and they do follow you around. And I do believe that dealers are getting better. But on this question of online purchasing, my opinion is it's great when you've got a 1 year old, a 2 year old, or a 3 year old vehicle, which still has low mileage and is warrantable, especially when you get Japanese imports, Korean imports, domestics. But what happens when how's the online model change when they're 5 years old, they're 7 years old? Does that, do you think, affect consumers that way? Frank?
Um, Again, it's a trust factor, right? So, do you trust the dealer you're buying a vehicle from to stand behind that product that is now promised you a good vehicle? Um, you know, for myself or for friends of mine, I have certain dealers that I will recommend. They've asked, "Well, can you find me a car on the auction?" No, I will not ever find a car for anybody on the auction, because if I find it, I'm responsible. Well, you sold me a bad car. So I will not sell anybody a car. I will not find anybody a car. I'll recommend a dealer to go buy a car from. And that's about it. But yeah, the older vehicles, do your research, find out what the quirks are of these cars. There's so much information online for certain models, what their problems are, what inherent issues they are, and be a smart consumer. And on the retail side, a lot of the dealers are now standing behind these cars for 3 months, 6 month warranty to give some peace of mind to the buyers as well, right? So, and when I've recommended somebody go buy a vehicle, I've always said make sure you get a bit of a warranty on the car. Just protect yourself. So,
Well, that's a very good point. And actually, Dave Jackson just made a comment that we as dealers have all been buying online heading into year two now. The live auctions are basically temporarily maybe a thing of the past. And one thing I do say that I do like that you did, which you just mentioned it, and with Dave bringing up this question, one nice thing EBlock has done is this assurance program. And I'm sure you're going to run into some dealers that are trying to take advantage of it, but it's a good thing to have a little peace of mind there.
yeah. So we do have reserved the right, if we notice somebody is abusing the program or taking advantage of it, we can disqualify them from the program. So we do have a God clause, if you want to call it. So if you're going to sit there and you're going to take advantage of us, we will not, you no longer qualify for our shared program. So there is some recourse for us to police it, and us as arbitration managers, I know the dealers in Vancouver very well. I've been doing that for 10 years now. If someone start to misbehave, I make a phone call and just have a chat with them.
Yeah, terrific. And
Frank,
Olivier, what do you think about this idea of warranties for your platform?
Look, as a consumer buying a car, I still find it pretty crazy that people will buy a car from another private person. It's often the biggest or the second biggest purchase you make in your life after your home, and you're gonna need that car for so many reasons, and you're buying it with no technology or technical visibility, and you've got no warranty. I think it's crazy. I know it's more expensive as a consumer to buy from a dealer, no doubt about it. Um, but I think that money is really worth immediately its value. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's similar for all of you, but we all know people in our group of friends or colleagues who had a bad experience buying a car privately and had to pay for it. It's these stories are a mile a dozen. Anyway, uh, so buying from a dealer will come with a warranty. I'll I think consumers will be very trustable to buy online from a brand that has warranty attached to it. It's what is still a little bit unknown is how much will they still want to drive the car before they buy it, smell it, touch it. I think it's less important for consumers ultimately than for dealers. I think that was Christian mentioning that earlier. You still want to, as much as possible, see the car before you buy it. For consumers, it's less important. You know what a Golf GTI looks like. You know what a Mazda 5 looks like. If you find the color and the year you want in the budget you want, I think many consumers will be ready to have most of the transaction happen online. I like that some dealers are like Canada Drive will give you a return warranty on it, within a few days. I think that's an interesting one. And I think the proof is still in the proverbial pudding here on how often that happens, that people will sit and then go no. But I'm ready to bet it's small enough that it's not going to pollute the experience too much. So any trust and confidence we can add in the consumer's hands will help rotate the cars faster. So possibly dealers will make a bit less margin that way. But I think they will trade it for volume or velocity, which is something all the dealers I'm talking to, and I've talked to probably 100 of them since January, they're all looking for more velocity and more volume, not necessarily more absolute margin. I still think the industry has to evolve that way. But I think online will bring that velocity for sure, maybe a little less margin, but more volumes.
And do you think warranty if I'm buying a car as a dealer, whether it be through your platform or through EBlock, do you think warranty adds a lot of value to
Yeah,
that?
we're not selling to consumers, so it's a little different for us, right? We're selling only to dealers, but the warranty as a consumer is a huge element, no doubt. Now you want to make sure the warranty is coming from somebody who is reputable and trustable. So I know a lot of people here know who are maybe the ones to avoid. Consumers don't, but I think we have to assume the majority, and I think it's the right assumption. The majority of dealers here are good people, and they'll live up to their warranty. It's I would be ready to bet at least 95% of them are really going to live up to that warranty. So, but as an industry, we're going to monitor that, and if people misbehave and start to create a bad image for the bad experiences, as an industry, we'll have to react together against that.
So Frank, I had a question since it kind of was interesting. So obviously we have a model where we have dealers buying from different sources and selling to consumers. We also have models where online selling directly, Clutch and others. Do you think auction companies in general will ever have a model where they sell direct to consumers?
That's an interesting question. It's hard to. You would have to have a retail license to do that, I guess, as an auction, in order to sell to the public, and then you would have to abide by the local, provincial VSA, OMVIC rules and policies. It would be difficult for an auction platform to do that because now you'd have to guarantee the vehicles even further than the Assure program possibly is in place at this point. And the unknown factor of no mechanical inspection of vehicles. All auctions don't do mechanical inspections. They do a wholesale pre-sale inspection, which is just a visual. The vehicles are not test driven for a long period of time. You wouldn't find any transmission problems, diffs that will flare up when the cars warm up, when they get to a certain temperature, engine noises that will appear after the car is warmed up. So those things would make it more difficult for an auction to become a direct to retail source. That being said, could it happen? Anything's possible.
And Jeff, thank you very much. Jeff, did you have any final questions, or we're kind of running out of time?
Where do you think we're going from here, gentlemen? We're literally, both of you are pretty much tech operators now, and dealerships, as we said, Dave made the comment, we're buying online, and we see John who's pivoted his business to his cool little studio setup, Bill with his backdrop behind him, Christian with what looks like the service department behind him. are we turning into something virtual here? Where are we going in the future? Olivier, because you're the tech guy first, I'll ask you.
So since we only have a few minutes, I'll make it short. But I tend to be a techno optimist, and so I think all that's happening right now is, I mean, giving you a bit of vertigo. Every aspect of the business, from manufacturing to distribution to marketing to servicing, is being disrupted by tech, and COVID has done nothing but amplify that movement. And so it gives you a bit of vertigo, all these changes. But I do believe it's full of opportunities. I would summarize my thought by saying the embracing and adopting these new technologies is key for the industry to fully recover in the next couple of years. And so we want to be very agile, very curious, very inquisitive into all these opportunities, and take the risk of testing things every now and then. I do see the industry doing that already. If we were not doing it, again, the success of EBlock and some other competitors would not be here. But I think we got to tune that curiosity up a little bit in the next 6 to 48 months. It's going to be very important.
Terrific. Thank you, Frank. And parting comments as well.
Yeah, for myself, 2.5 years ago when I left the physical auction and joined the online world, it scared the living crap out of me, because I was not a techie person, and to try and adapt on the fly and learn, how to do things online. And with COVID, when it came around, it became even more online with Zoom meetings and with conference calls, and having to deal with vehicle problems virtually through videos and audios and photos. That was a whole new learning curve. Has it forced us to pivot? Yes, it has. Transparency of listings online, transparency of engine problems, transparency of vehicle history reports. All that's become so much more important on the online world, because you're their eyes, you're their ears, you're the information supplying to them to buy the vehicle with confidence. That's where I think it's changed, and it's we're a company that is constantly improving our app, constantly trying to get better at what we do, more transparency, more information to the consumers to buy with confidence. So yes, I see it going that direction even further.
Terrific. And I have to say, I know your leadership are some of the most dynamic people out there. So, and of course you too, of course. And I have a final question for you, Frank. 2005 Corvette, 10,500 kilometers. Am I going to get $1 gazillion if I run it on the online?
You might, if you run it today on that Highline auction, you just might.
It's a little late today, but I thought about it, and then I watched one on the competitor for way more money. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. Ian, I'll leave it to you to close it off there.
Yeah, I just want to do a quick thank you to everyone. And also, Bill Harvey had a comment saying North Toronto Auto Auction actually has been selling cars directly to consumers 2 days every month for years. No guarantee, he says, but just a thought.
And by the way,
have a great month.
By the way, eBay Auto was probably the first one in the industry. So auctions to consumers has been here for a long time. It can work.
Yeah, that's for darn sure. So with that, we'll bid you all adieu. Thank you again. I know it's month end, so we appreciate everybody joining us.
Have a good month then.
Take care all. Bye-bye.